I don't see many that are old enough to remember Pearl Harbor Day. You do? You remember that? You remember that? Okay. I was a 16-year-old boy then, and that set the stage for me to say, I don't want to wait and be drafted. The next year, they had my number. And then the next year, I go to the draft board and say, I want to volunteer for the Marine Corps. And did so. Ended up in San Diego boot camp, and they said, you're going to sea school, and I needed more schooling. So after sea school, I knew what that entailed. That meant that I would be seagoing. And so then they sent me up to San Francisco, and there was the big USS Indianapolis, 610 feet long, and I started to say you can imagine, but you can't imagine. What this Kentucky boy thought when he saw that big USS Indianapolis, and that's going to be my home for the duration of the war. Okay, I'm aboard the Indianapolis, and just right off, anyway, talk Kwajalein. I was at Saipan, Tinian, Guam, Sea Battle of the Philippine Sea, where our Task Force 58 shot down 403 Japanese aircraft that day. Then I was down at Iwo Jima, a place that we should never have landed a troop. We could have starved them out, but we lost 20,000 plus Marines there. And then after Palau, I was at 3-hour strikes on Tokyo. Then I was at Okinawa. At Okinawa, we received a kamikaze plane. I recall that we were there when the 6th Marines and 27th Army, of which I had a brother in the 27th Army, they were going to land, but we're there ahead of them, and we're setting off at a distance, but we are making the beaches prepared for the Marines and the Army to land. Well, it so happened that there's a little island there, Ishima, and the Japanese were in there, hidden in, and at night, they'd come out and they would do harm. And then in the air, then there were many, many suicide planes. And it was at Okinawa that we received a kamikaze plane. And I can see that plane today as the boatswain blew the whistle, set emergency condition in the anti-aircraft battery. And the way he said that, you knew that something, and they began to look up. And at about 11 seconds, they said, that plane hit. But he nearly overshot. I was on the fantail on a 40 millimeter, and I grabbed a clip of ammunition, got another clip, and set it in the barrel, but Sky Half never did get the barrels raised, and he hit. Well, a long story short, one bomb went all the way through the ship, and one went into the water, and we pushed the debris overboard. Okay, now then, after that, then we come to the States. We had to come to the States to prepare for an overhaul, and after the overhaul, which took quite a bit of doings, a couple of months or so, and then on the 16th of July, 1945, at Hunters Point, San Francisco, we look out on the dock, and we saw all kinds of Navy Marine brass out there. And then we noticed that there was a kind of a big box, big crate, I mean big, 12 or 15 feet long, yeah, maybe 4 feet or so high and wide. And our big crane reaches over and gets that and sets it on the quarterdeck. My Marine captain said, Harrell, follow those into the port hangar deck and station a watch. Well, Captain Parks, what do we have? And he said, we don't know. And we did not know. we had the foggiest idea of what we were going to be guarding. And then from there, there were a couple of proposed to be Air Force officers that were coming aboard. And as they came aboard, they had a little canister in a metal cage, maybe 18 feet or inches big, you know, and set that on the quarterdeck. And my Marine captain said, Corporal Harrell, follow them up to a certain compartment and station a guard on the outside of the hatch. Well, what are we guarding there? We didn't know. We didn't know who they were. But let me tell you something. They were not Air Force officers. Some of you older ones will know this. They were scientists from Los Alamos, New Mexico. Now, what we were guarding was half of the uranium that America owned at that time. And once we reached Tinian Island, the other half was already loaded aboard a B-29. Once we made our journey, they would meet us. We made that 5,400 mile from Hunters Point, San Francisco in 10 days, 50 mile a day in a heavy cruiser. We delivered it on the 26th of July, 1945. We did not know what we had. But after we delivered that, then Captain McVeigh then said we are going to drop off at Guam because he said, I've got to get my sailing orders. Well, we knew the scuttlebutt was that the main invasion of Japan would have taken place in November 45. So we drop off at Guam. Captain McVeigh asked for his sailing orders, and they tell him, yes, you're to go to the Philippines to prepare for the main invasion of Japan. Captain McVeigh asked for an escort. They tell him, you don't need an escort. Don't need an escort? We don't have underwater sound equipment. They could have said, you need an escort because 4 days ago, we lost the USS Underhill. We lost 129 boys through the same waters that you're going to be traveling. They don't tell him that. They don't tell him that we've broken the Japanese code. We know everything that they're doing at that particular time. They don't tell him that. But they send us out in harm's way. Well, that is 2 days later after we delivered that top secret cargo on the 26th. So it's the 27th, 28th. Now, on the night of the 29th, I had been the captain's orderly, and he had said at the change of the watch at 12 o'clock, I'm going to announce that since it's 110 degrees out, you're in a steel ship and it's hot down below. I'm going to announce that people can come out on the open deck and make them a pallet. And so at 12 o'clock, he announced that. I get off a watch and I do what? I go down to the Marine compartment, I get my blanket. I don't get my kapok flap jacket, I don't need that thing. But I get my blanket and I come forward. I wish I had a picture of the ship, but if you can imagine that ship 610 feet long, and there is a turret, 8-inch guns, up about 50 feet from the bow. Okay, I made my pallet right down on the deck under the barrels of that big 8-inch gun. And okay, now then, I just begun maybe to go doze off to sleep, not knowing what is about to take place. But all of a sudden, out on the horizon out here, Commander Hoshimoto in that I-58 submarine, he has his little periscope sticking out of the water, and he was picking us up. He had not been successful the whole war in getting anything. And he knew that sooner or later someone would go through those waters, and all he had to do was be patient. And he was patient. The little periscope up, let's say he picked us out 12 mile out. And now, we had ceased zagging that night at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock. The officer of the deck whom I knew quite well, Lieutenant McKissick from down in Texas. I'll get back to him later. But he asked permission from the captain at the change of the watch to cease zigzag, and Captain McVeigh came out on the main deck with McKissick, and they looked at the weather, and they said at the change of the watch at 8 o'clock, permission to cease zigzag. And so we are not zigzagging. Commander Hoshimoto is waiting out there. All right, Commander Hoshimoto knows that he has a good target, and so he tells his crew, load 6 torpedoes. There are 6 torpedoes being loaded. And then there are 2 torpedoes, we call them Keatons, a torpedo that has 2 men in that. 2 men were in one of those, 2 wanted to get in the other. Now that's a suicide mission, because once they're fired, they cannot be recovered. 2 were in one, but Commander Hoshimoto tells them to stand by. Fire! 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 About every 2 seconds, he fires a torpedo. Well, may I say that 2 of those torpedoes were successful. The first that hit us cut about 35 feet of the bow of the ship off. When I say it cut it off, I'm sleeping maybe within 30 feet of that under the barrels of number 1 turret. I know that the bow of the ship is gone. And the second torpedo was back close to the marine compartment there on the starboard side. But it's close to the magazine under number 2 turret, the big 8-inch guns. And it set that magazine off, and it everything, but went through everything completely up in the air. I don't know if I've got pictures that'll be shown today, Willa. No? Okay. I've got a picture with the help of Commander Hoshimoto to tell you what the ship looked like. And I had an artist from Walt Disney to assist, and I have that picture. And I travel all over the country, and I tell the story, and I sell that picture. Okay, now then, he's fired those torpedoes. 2 have hit us. The bow of the ship is cut off. I realized that ship is sinking. I could hear the bulkheads breaking down below. If you can imagine, we're maybe 30-something feet wide at that point. We are 2.5 decks deep at that point. Those 4 big screws are pushing, pushing, pushing. That water is being forced in tremendously. And that's just filling up the lower half, that first 100 yards of the ship. So before I could get back to the quarterdeck, which is my emergency station, I've got to make my way back. And as I start aft back to the quarterdeck, realizing that I've got to get back there and find out what I'm to be doing, I realized that this ship is sinking. Then there were those who were coming out of the main deck forward on the main deck, and that was pretty much officers' quarters up there. And as they were coming out, most of them were just in their night skivvies, but they were flash burned with all of that explosion now. Or maybe they had touched their hand on that hot deck and left the skin of the hand on the surface of that deck then. And now then, they are pleading for someone to give them some assistance. But that's really nothing that I knew to do to assist them. But I know I'm to get back to my emergency station because we don't know what's going to be taking place the next few minutes or so. But I get back close to the quarterdeck, realizing I don't have a life jacket. My life jacket is down in the marine compartment. I know the ship is sinking. I can hear those bulkheads down below breaking. We're 3 decks deep back in the central part of that ship. And you could just feel all of that that's taking place down below. So I get to the quarterdeck. I look at all around up hanging in big canvas bags, a new supply of K-Bach life jackets. My Marine lieutenant was there, and Lieutenant Stauffer permission to cut down some of those life jackets. And his response was, not until we get word to abandon ship. The ship is sinking. When I say it's sinking, I'm on the quarterdeck. The quarterdeck on the starboard side normally would be 8 feet above the waterline. But there's water on the quarterdeck. So we are listening to where there's water on the quarterdeck. We're waiting for word to come down from the bridge to abandon ship. We know that the ship is gone. May I say, it went down in about 12 minutes. So maybe 9 minutes or so has already passed. And we're waiting for a good captain to give word. And finally, word begins to trickle down. Now all communication is knocked out. No electrical power. The only lights that we have is the inferno from the explosions aboard. And so he can't give word to abandon ship. But he finally does. He had sent someone down, he thought, to take inventory to see if the ship would be salvageable. They never made it back out to the surface. So finally he gives word. Abandon ship. And I can hear that today. It's kind of like an echo coming down from the bridge forward there. And you can imagine, I don't know how many might have been on the quarterdeck, a couple of hundred plus, no doubt, anyhow. And water is on the quarterdeck. The first 100 yards of the ship is under. And we know that we've got to get off. But to go over and to hold on to that steel cable, looking out into the blackness of the night, and looking at all of that oil on the water, and seeing boys climb over, jumping into the water, some jumping maybe on someone else, desperate to get off the ship, because as the old saying is, it's going to drag you under if you don't get off and get away from it. Okay, I recall holding on to that rail, and what would you do? What would you do? I'll tell you what you'll do. If you've never prayed, you'll pray. You'll pray. And you'll pray. And as I held on to that rail, looking out into the blackness of the night, thinking, this is the end of life. I've got to leave the ship that's leaving me, and I don't know what is out there. And to hold on to that rail and tell the Lord, I don't want to die. I want to live. I don't know what all I promised. I promised much, and much I failed, I'm sure. But I promised. And may I say, from a little Sunday school boy, I thought of a verse of Scripture, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth give unto you. Let not your hearts be troubled. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm scared to death. And I tell the Lord, I don't want to die. Mom and Dad back home. 6 younger brothers, older sister and a younger sister. And may I say, and a certain brunette, and said that she would wait for me. May I say, and she waited. She waited. We were married in 1947. That's 69 years ago. I called her last night. She's still waiting. It's 92. In for 69 years. Okay, I promise the Lord. Now that is something to live for. Mom and Dad and brothers and sisters and a certain young lady that said, I'll wait for you. And she waited. And so I climb over that rail, and if you could visualize that, the keel of the ship, you know, is nearly as, well, neither one of them are level, you know. And I step over that rail, and I made 2 big long steps, jumped into the water feet first. That kapok jacket came up over my head, and I'm desperate to get my head above that oil. They said there's a half an inch of oil. Well, there's a lot of oil. And I'm getting away. I see that the 100 yards of the ship is already under. That fantail is coming high in the air. Those 4 big screws are still turning. And I saw it as it went completely under. It turned and went down. out in the Marianas Trough, maybe 5 or 6 miles deep or so there. Anyway, I saw it when she went under. I'm desperate to get away from it, thinking that it may pull me under. But no, if you could just think with me, the bow of the ship is off, and now it's being pushed forward. Now the bow is under, and that ship still has air in it, but as the ship is going down, that air is coming out. And what I'm seeing is bubbles, 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 much, much bubbles. Not something pulling me in. And I'm maybe 50 yards from it. But to see that and to somewhat hear some of that, I saw the Indianapolis as she went completely under. But now, I know that I've got some shipmates out here, and I'm plugging away to get out to the first buddy out there. And I get out there, and we were taking inventory. Many did not have K-Pop life jackets. Several did not have. Several were injured, and they aren't going to make it, not even through the first night. And I, as a Marine, I won't know any Marines. There were 2 Marines in that group. And I go to the first one, and he was a new recruit that had come aboard, maybe as we went through Pearl, or maybe even at Guam, but nevertheless, he was a new man. And I could see him. I tried to assist him, and he was nearly beyond any hope. And I'm holding on to him, encouraging him, and within the hour or so, my shipmate that I didn't know, Leland Murphy, he's passed on into eternity. There was another Marine, and I got in touch with him. I knew him. I was his squad leader. Someone asked me today about Spooner. What happened to Spooner? He passed away maybe 10 years ago. Okay, Spooner is part of my squad. And so Spooner now had dived into that half-inch of oil. You can imagine sticking your head into a half-inch of oil. Now you're going to wear that for 4.5 days. How are you going to get it out of your eyes? You aren't. You're going to rub them, and you're going to rub more in your eyes. That salt from that water is going to get on your face, and it's 110 degrees sun. That salt is going to dry. It's going to be powder. You're going to rub your eyes. That's Spooner. That's his eyes. And Spooner was having severe problem. And now, by the second day, Spooner can't see. And his eyes are open. He can't close them, but with them being open, he could hardly see at all. And so Spooner is telling me, I'm his squad leader, Harrell, I can't take this anymore. And I'm sure he was in misery. And he said, I'm going to commit suicide. Spooner, you're not going to do any such thing. There's only 2 Marines in this group, and there's going to be 2 Marines when everyone else is gone. And I saw that he meant to do what he was saying he was going to do. I kind of exertedly, I grabbed a hold of him, and I turned him to me, and I fastened his life jacket onto mine, and I swam with him through the night. The next day, now he makes me a vow that, and I think somewhat his eyes, that soreness has subsided a bit, and so he's going to promise me that he's going to try to live. Okay, now then, let me take you back, though, to that first night now again. That first night, we're losing boys just every little bit. By morning of that 80 some odd now, we've lost a dozen or more. And now through that first day, 110 degrees, we're losing boys every little bit. In fact, I can just hear this today. You can hear a blood-curdling scream, and you look to see what might be happening out there a little distant. And you look, and you see fins. You see a body that has been taken under, and then like a fish cork will bring the bait to the top, Now, that K-Bug jacket brings that body maybe back to the top. You see fins, blood. You dare not to go and check and see who your buddy might be. Too dangerous to go and check. So you leave that for the time. Sometime later, though, you want to know who that sailor might have been. And so you're close enough around it, and the sharks maybe aren't around you right now, and you check that body, and you find out that the bottom torso is gone, or he's disemboweled, or maybe a leg is off, an arm is off. Now, you've got that body, though, that's going to be with you now. Okay, so we're losing many boys. After that first night, now the first day. Now, let's go to the second night after the first day. Now, at nighttime, the water is about 85 degrees. Now, can you imagine how you would feel if you're soaking wet, 85-degree weather, and with about a 17-mile-an-hour wind? If you don't have clothing on, I'll tell you what's going to happen. It's not long till that 98.6 is going to start dropping a degree within every hour, a degree, and it gets down to about that 85. That's what the water is. But that wind is going to make you cool, and then you're going to get hypothermia, and there's no recovering. So you're going to lose boys. Okay, let's bring you further into that second day now. Now the second day, remember, we've been swimming. I mean swimming. You've got to swim. Now, you can't just float in a K-Pog jacket. Yes, you can float some, but there's too much to be done and too much that you're doing. You've got too many that are struggling, that are needing some assistance, that don't have K-Pog jackets, or that injured, and they need some assistance. So you're doing what you can. Okay, now then the second day, you are desperate for water. Okay, look, you're swimming in it. There's all kinds of good, pure water. I'll tell you what happens. I saw boys that would tear off some of their clothing, take a patch of cloth and put water up in that salt water, put their head under it and drink some of that, and then what happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Within the hour, I can tell you what happened. Within the hour, that reaches the brain, and that body does not know what's happening. He does not know his closest buddy. He may think that his buddy is a Jap, and he may attack his buddy because he thinks he's a Jap. Or he may see another buddy, and you've got a canteen of water in your K-Pog jacket. He takes out his sheath knife and he stabs you. And now blood. Now that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Now sometime though the second day, when you're so desperate for water, and you think that you've been thirsty, but just imagine your lips now are parched open, they're bleeding, they're full of salt water, they're full of oil, and your tongue now is swelling in your mouth, and you can hardly talk. You're desperate for water, but you know not to do what that buddy did, drink some of that salt water. And so all of a sudden, look! You know, I'm in Florida, am I not? But I left in the rain yesterday morning, and here, rain, there's a little rain cloud coming over up in Tennessee. And now here a little rain cloud was coming over, and it said, look, it's raining. And we are desperate. Now it takes a little time for that cloud to finally come over. It's just raining right down. Well, how much water can you catch in your big mouth? Not much. You open your mouth. Now as the rain comes over, that you're covered with oil. That oil, you know, you drink some of that. And maybe you take your hands and you cup some of that water, and you get a little bit of water, and you thank the Lord, you know, thank you, thanks for the rain, thanks for the water. But Now, it isn't long until that water that's been polluted a little bit with some of that oil, it decides, I've got to come out, and it comes out. Okay, let's go on through that second day now. Let's take it to the third day. You try to help, but there comes a point that someone is helpless. You can't help someone that's helpless, that can't help themselves. Okay, third day at noon. 17 of us. 17 of us. How long will a K-Box life jacket hold you out of the water? 4.5 days? No way. 3 days? Maybe not. By the third day at noon, there's only 17 of us. You know what we're doing? Number one, I have to say, there's no such thing as an atheist in foxholes. I don't care who you are, you will pray. And they prayed. I can hear this one sailor now. God, if you're out there, I don't want to die. I've got a son back home I've never seen. He never got to see his son either. There were 17 of us. We prayed, and we prayed, and we prayed. And our K-Box jackets are so waterlogged that we've got to keep paddling away, or else, you get down in the water and, you're going to drink too much of that water and then you're going to go crazy. Okay, so we're desperate. And so we found out that you can do something. What can you do? I'll tell you what you can do. Just like I say to ladies many times, when you have that old sponge, it won't hold any more water. What do? You squeeze it out. Okay, before we squeezed ours out, we tried something. We take our K-Box jackets off. We pull them down under us. And we sit in them. And now they have the same buoyancy. The only thing, rather than being up around your shoulders and your back, they're down under you. But you've got to keep swimming, or they'll pitch you in the water. So there's no such thing as floating in a K-Box jacket. Not at that time anyhow. So we are pedaling away with a K-Box jacket down under us. And then sometime that third day, we came up on a swell, maybe 8, sometimes 10 or 12 foot swells, but let's say 8 foot swells. And we looked out at the distance and we said, look, there's some boys out there. And finally we were up. When they're up, and we can holler, you know how you boys carry some water. And we were screaming at them and they at us. And finally we see that's a little raft. A little raft? Yes, a little raft. And finally after maybe 30, 45 minutes or so, we're going toward it. It's coming toward us. And all of a sudden we see a little makeshift of a raft. Now, no one was on the raft, but there was a raft. But there's someone with it. There were 5 sailors. Now, that raft consisted, some of you sailors, you know what a 40 millimeter ammunition can is. How about taking 3 of those as a flotation device? How about lashing those together? How about taking an old potato crate or 2 or a slatted orange crate and fasten that somehow, some way to make a little makeshift of a raft? Now, who's going to ride on that? No one. But what are you going to do? You're going to take that life jacket off of that boy that's been dead for 3 days, and you're going to say a prayer, and you're going to commit him to the sea. You're going to take his life jacket, and they had taken those life jackets and squeezed them out and put them up on that little raft. Now they're drying out in that 110 degrees sun. Now, here are 5 sailors, and I don't know how many life jackets they had, but they came into our group, and they tell us that we have to get closer to the Philippines. We've got to get closer to the Philippines. We see planes flying over at 30,000 feet, but no one's looking for us. And they want to know, anyone want to join them? I say to my Marine buddy Spooner now, I said, Spooner, I'm going to go with them. He said, Harold, if you're going, I'll go with you. 2 Marines joined 5 sailors, and we think we're going to swim to the Philippines. We didn't know it was another 500 miles. But when you see a group of 80 go down now to 17, it's time to do something. And so 2 Marines joined 5 sailors, and our other buddy said, you're crazy. You can't push that raft to the Philippines. But we said, we're going, and here are 2 Marines joined those 5 sailors. I can see myself now up on that front corner plugging away, and they're telling me, you've got to keep us going west. The sun goes down in the west. The Philippines maybe is 500 miles long. It's someplace in the west. Keep us going. Well, it began to get kind of overcast, and we began to see, it's gonna be dark, nighttime, but here we're plugging away. And so sometime later in the afternoon, before it got very dark, it's still light, we came up on the swell, and I said, look, there's some debris out there. Wonder what that could be. Well, 8-foot swells, it takes some time before you're up and you can see. And I said, that's some kind of debris out there. I'm going to go out and see what it is. Could it be food? Could it be something that edible or what? I mean, when you're desperate, you're going to look. And so I said, I'm going to swim out and get it and see. Okay, now I take my K-Pop jacket and I put it on. I'm going to do a dog paddle, and I do so. And I finally get out to what that crate might be. And as I got within maybe 6 or 8 feet of that crate, and I saw those potatoes floating in the top of that water. In desperation, I reach in and I get a hold of that first potato, but kind of in the agony of defeat, it was rotten. And as I squeezed it, that rot squeezed through my fingers, but it was solid on the inside. So what do? You peel it somewhat with your hand, you peel it with your teeth. You don't spit out all the rot, but you have a little bit of water, a little bit of food. And I begin to think of the ant that cares for the future. I squeezed off several potatoes, and I put them in my dungaree pockets. And then that crate, no doubt, was pretty much full of half-rotten potatoes that someone had just pitched overboard. And my buddies then said, what is it? What is it? Rotten potatoes. They leave at the raft, and they came out and kind of joined me, and we had some half-rotten potatoes, but squeezed them off, and they were solid on the inside. Okay, now it's night. It's getting dark, and the moon is not out there. The sun has been gone a good while. Which way is west? We don't know. We just know which way is up. And so we are desperate. We're desperate. And then, finally, you know how your voice will carry on the water. Finally, maybe, I don't know, after midnight, we heard voices. We heard voices, and we would yell at them. They back at us. And finally, they came into our group. And the first individual that came in was my good friend aboard ship, Lieutenant McKissick. Now, when I say a good friend, many times I was the captain's orderly, and he had a message for me, and the greenhorn that I was. I had the foggiest idea of the nomenclature that he's talking about, of something at a certain distance, moving in a certain direction, at a certain speed, don't know what it is. And he would say, repeat that back to me. Oh, after maybe the third time, he said, okay, go and report that. And that was McKissick. Now, who is this first guy that comes into our group? Lieutenant McKissick. And I was so happy to see him because I know him really personally, not as a buddy, but as a comrade aboard. And I was so happy to see McKissick. I don't know whether there's 1, 2, 3, or 4 sailors with him. They came in by voice, and finally they came into our group. But there was a certain Marine that had a pocket full of half-rotten potatoes that he shared with McKissick. And there's more in that old crate. And then by this time now at night, it's late at night. And now the winds have died down. The seas are pretty calm. And we've had a little bit of food, maybe. But we don't know which way is west and what is happening. May I say, you cannot just continue to swim. And now the fourth day, the sun comes up, and I'm looking for the raft. No raft. I'm looking for my buddy Spooner. No Spooner. I'm with McKissick and one other sailor. What's happened? No one knows. At that point, no one knows what has happened. But I'm not with the raft. I'm with McKissick and one sailor. Okay. What are you going to do? You're going to make with what you've got. Okay, McKissick knew me as a Marine. I knew him as an officer of the deck many times. And I knew him as a Texan, a peach of a guy for this old Corporal Marine. And shake that sailor, and I found out he's still alive. And he responded a little bit, but he could nearly care less. But he raised up, and I tell him to hang in there, that help is on the way. Okay. The second time, the same thing. The third time, too late. He's gone. So it's just McKissick and myself. And then McKissick and I, he would ask me if I'd ever been to the Philippines. No, never been there. He had. And he was going to be the good Joe from Texas that once we made it, he would take me under wing. And I'm sure had we made it, he would have done that. So here we are. And now then my mind is playing tricks on me. I knew McKissick, but I grew up with an uncle that was 2 years older than me. Uncle Edwin back in Kentucky. B-29's at maybe 30,000 feet, bombing Tokyo. But no one's looking for us. But here's a plane coming in. And so what do? I hear plane. Look, I see a plane. I see a plane. I see a plane. I'm waving. I'm praying. Thank you, Lord. Okay, let me take you up there. Now, believe this. I'll take you up there. Lieutenant McKissick flying that Ventura. I call it a B-25. A twin-engine plane with wheels. Here he's flying maybe 4,000 feet up there. But he's going to fly seemingly directly over us. Let me take you up there. He's looking out forward of him, let's say 4 miles. He's looking out at his peripheral vision, 2.5 miles each side. He's looking at 20 square miles down there. Now, what is he actually looking for? Submarines. Now, to see a man's head down here 6 by 8 inches? Impossible. Yeah, it's possible. You know what he did? Lieutenant McKissick is flying there at, say, 4,000 feet up there. And he's having problems with his radio antenna. When he flew out of Palau, out on the search and destroy, he found out that his radio antenna, that little trailer sock on it, keep it from just flopping back and forth, had come off, and that trailer was just flopping like everything. And he says to the co-pilot, take over control. I'm going to go aft, and I'm going to pull in that antenna, and I'm going to put something on it so it'll kind of drag through, or we can't reach back at base. And the co-pilot takes over. Lieutenant Gwynn then goes back. He opens the bomb bay door. He glances down. What did he see? I'll tell you what he saw. I spoke to the 100th anniversary of Boy Scouts out in Spokane. There were 5,400 scouts. I said, you know what he saw? He saw your little mirror. When he looked down at the water, the sun hit that oil off of our clothing, and he saw that